Group 9 Initiates, Part 1, Expanding Our Consciousness from Human to Soul to Spirit, video by Dr. Lisa Love. As a reminder, if you've just jumped into this video, the overall series talks about 10 evolutionary groups, and these groups reveal how humans progress from their baser animal instincts, where they are focused mainly on surviving and procreating, to the point where they know who they are as spiritual beings and live accordingly. According to the Bailey teachings, all 10 groups exist among us. In general, we might say groups 1 to 6 are primarily focused on becoming human, groups 7 and 8 are focused on becoming soul, groups 9 and 10 on becoming spirit. So here is the Bailey model. You see the original model to the left. To the right, you see colors that aren't necessarily accurate, but are based on the color spectrum. And we see outlined the idea of the personality, the egoic lotus or soul, the spiritual triad, and the monad. What we discover in Bailey's model is that groups 1 to 6 have their focus of consciousness on the emotional plane, which is also known as the plane of karma or desire. So we see that there are 7 planes. This is the emotional plane, and we see that it has to do with the personality at what is known as the coordinated personality. All the way up here is the integrated personality, but on the emotional plane it is the coordinated personality, and this is the majority of humanity. They are emotional in nature and focused on karma or desire. Now, because of this emotional focus, their lives are full of ups and downs, feeling good when their desires are met and bad when they are not. And driven by desire, they always seek more and more and are never satisfied. That desire is primarily based on an idea that happiness comes from out there in the world of the 5 senses. Now, in group 6, we find that all their outer desires are met to excess. That's what we call the group 6 materialist, who are not yet spiritual. They're coordinated personalities, but then they start to become the group 6 aspirants, where they start to realize that all that stuff out there isn't making them happy. They start to look within and aspire to spiritual life. But in groups 1 and 2, almost none of the desires are met, and there are said to be very few, maybe 1,000, who knows really what the amount is, but they're said to be almost non-existent. Most of humanity is said to be, first of all, in group 5, then 4, and then 3 within the Bailey books. That's what it says in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. And they are able to get more of their desires met. Obviously, group 5 is better than group 4 and group 3. We could say that we go from the lower class to the middle class to the upper middle class here, with the group 6 representing the uber rich. And for more information on these groups, watch the videos at the Patreon channel, Soul to Spirit, listed here. We have a series on all of this, and we're coming to the end of that series as we're now in Becoming Spirit. But before we talk about Becoming Spirit, let's go back to groups 7 and 8, where we are becoming soul, or the soul-infused personality, as Alice Bailey calls it. As we get to group 7 and 8, we're now focused on becoming soul, and group 7 represents a radical shift where humans no longer look out there for happiness or the divine, but within themselves. Now that quest starts when we're a group 6 aspirant, as I already mentioned, but they're not very serious about it. Group 7 is also not as serious about it as group 8, but they are much more on a quest and searching than group 6 aspirants are. At group 7 and 8, we also see that there is an increased attempt to spiritualize their body, emotions, and minds. And as they make this transition, they may also struggle with being in this world because so much of the focus is on not being of this world. So how to do both is kind of tricky, be in the world and not of it, for groups 7 and 8. In group 8, there is more understanding of the inner realms, and the many distortions that go on in these inner realms are being removed. There is also more mastery of these realms due to an improved ability to understand and master their minds. That's the essential training when we are becoming soul. How to master our minds. That begins by understanding them. And that's why things like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are so essential for this training at group 7 and 8. Those in group 8 are also more grounded and focused on implementing what they are learning. With group 7, it's more about gaining the knowledge, but they're not walking the talk. It's like they've read a lot of cookbook recipes, but they've never tried to make any of them and see how they taste here. And they can seem very arrogant at group 7 because they have so much knowledge, but they have not done what the real work is, and the real work is becoming soul. And so group 8 is understanding that we need to walk that talk. And so they are busy removing selfish tendencies, and they seek to be in the world as well as not of it, as they serve within the world in a more illumined way. And again, there are extensive videos on groups 7 and 8 that you can watch on the patreon.com/Soul to Spirit channel. We also see how groups 7 and 8 have shifted onto the mental plane, residing mainly within what is known as the plane of the lower mind. Now, if we look carefully, the mental plane has these little dots here, and we have 4 subplanes have to do with the plane of the lower mind. 3 subplanes have to do with the plane of the solar angel here. Now, on the mental plane, groups 7 and 8 are penetrating the realm of thought. They're learning how thought works. They're learning how their minds are conditioned to think in certain ways and how their thoughts influence their own and everybody's lives. So meditation and Raja Yoga and the practice of Kriya and Kundalini Yoga are increasingly being understood. They're not really being practiced until we get into group 9, which we're going to talk about more through this series of videos on group 9, but they're starting to understand how do we approach these inner realms and how do we approach meditation practice. Now, because they are still a ways away from the plane of the solar angel, those in group 7 and 8 can be colored still by selfish desires. Their emotions can still be reactive and overly attached to their beliefs and points of view. But on the positive side, they're more inclusive, open, and flexible than those who are in groups 1 and 6. And I'm giving you a brief overview. There are extensive videos with a lot more information on all of these groups, as I've mentioned before on the Patreon site. So let's start getting into becoming spirit, which begins at group 9. And now we're what we might call the spirit-infused personality. As we move into group 9, a major change occurs. Those in group 9 reside on the plane of the solar angel and have completed the process of soul infusion, but now they're shifting into the realm of spirit. So we read in the Bailey books, especially Letters on Occult Meditation, that before we become group 9, we have become mentally colossal and logical and scientific in our approach to life. And this is true no matter what ray makeup you have. You may have a lot of what are considered the non-scientific rays like 246 in your ray makeup. This is a typology system that Bailey uses. But you still have a scientific approach to life. Doesn't mean you're a scientist, but you have a scientific approach to life. And in group 9, their minds are increasingly fused with love, as mental and spiritual pride are eliminated. This is one of the big issues, especially in spiritual groups, is everybody is a spiritual somebody, and they always have to manage their idea of how important they think they are spiritually. And one of the things we'll see with group 9 is the shift from being a leader of a group to working with various groups. Though much more humble at group 9, they are at the same time powerful, and they are found influencing leaders and thinkers around the world as they attempt to create a synthesis of understanding of many lines of thought to create paradigms of thought that benefit not only the whole of humanity but our entire planet as well. And this paragraph is really important, because so many people want to claim that they are an initiate, or somebody is past the third initiation or the fourth initiation. But if that person isn't humble and at the same time influencing leaders and thinkers around the world, and that is not just in esoteric groups. In fact, most group 9 people are not found in any esoteric group whatsoever. But they are creating a synthesis of understanding of many lines of thought, many disciplines, and are creating the paradigms of thought that benefit the whole of humanity. So it is a colossal thing to be a group 9 initiate. And I've read so many books and heard so many claims of people claiming to be an initiate, and these people are relatively not very impactful in the world. They may be impactful with a small group, but by the time we get to group 9, we're having an impact on the world. That is a significant difference between a group 7, group 8, who are becoming soul, and group 9 becoming spirit. So here then we see the plane of the solar angel where the soul resides. The soul is represented here. This is sometimes also known as the egoic lotus, which you see right here. And living as soul, those in group 9 are now taking what is known as the third and even fourth initiations. Initiations are expansions of consciousness. And they are now also expanding into the realm of spirit, which is known as the spiritual triad. This is Atma, Buddhi, Manas, or what can also be known as Sat, Chit, Ananda. Chit is down here, Ananda is here. In that particular system, Ananda has to do with the Buddhic plane here. So the spiritual triad is comprised mainly of what I said, Atmic, spiritual, Buddhic, intuitional planes, with a little bit of it down here on the mental plane. And as they move into group 10, as those in group 9 are shifting into group 10, they will increasingly be within this spiritual triad, these spirit or spiritual realms. And you see group 10 is firmly up here within the triad here. This is really, they're mainly in the intuitional Buddhic plane here and working increasingly into the Atmic plane. And there you see it circled overall here. Those in group 9 also demonstrate greater control of their minds, able to quiet their thoughts more frequently, and enter the initial states of samadhi, mainly savitarka and savichara samadhi, because they possess more discernment, also known as viveka. Their understanding of spiritual realms is much more accurate. That's really important, because until we're in group 9 as an initiate, we can still be full of a lot of glamours and distortions about where we think we're at on the spiritual path, or what we think the inner realms are like, or even our understanding of a certain model that represents spirituality and so forth. So one of the reasons a lot of people don't get involved in the Bailey model is because it is so complicated. Well, I've studied this model for over 40 years, and for the last 10 years, I have been working on compiling all the terms that are used in these books together in a cohesive system. And that includes something known as the names and the chela names. And I'm going to now put them together here in this video for group 9. In previous videos, remember there are 6 chela names, so there are 3 here. We've already looked at 3. And we learned that in group 7, we had 2 of those chela names, little chelas and chelas in the light, are associated with group 7. Group 8, which has subcategories, names of accepting and pledged disciples, are associated with the 3rd chela name of accepted disciple. Now we're going to look at group 9, which has 3 names and 3 chela names, and we're going to put them together here. So we have the names probationary initiate, initiated disciple, and initiate. And a lot of people that study the Bailey teachings aren't aware of these additional names, which represent stages of growth that we have to go through before we become an initiate. But we're in that process in group 9. So let's correlate the names with the chela names as I've done before. And we see a probationary initiate is correlated with chela on the thread, initiated disciple with chela in the master's aura, and initiate with chela in the master's heart. Now, this system is very complicated. I am pretty confident at this stage that I'm getting these correspondences correct, but you never know. It may be in a few more years you'll watch a video where I've refined this even more. But in this video, this is where I believe these correlations are. So here is an example of that chart on all the different terms in the Bailey model, and you can see just how many there are. Here's all the categories, and here's all the terms, and here's me attempting to put them together according to the 10 evolutionary groups. And that's what my whole series is about here. But we're not going to get into that. I have entire videos on this. And again, you get copies of these charts if you make a small donation. But let's look at initiate defined. Quote, "The initiate is not simply a good man. The world is full of good men who are probably a long way from being initiates." And if you're brand new to the Bailey teachings, they were written 100 years ago. Everybody everywhere used the male pronoun for everything. There was no feminine pronoun at that time. So don't let that trip you up. I don't want to change the wording here of the text to try and be PC in our era. So the world is full of good men or humans who are probably a long way from being initiates. It's really important for us to understand. Even in spiritual communities, I've been recognizing that we have to distinguish, are these just good people in a spiritual community who really are only at groups 4 and 5 versus 7 and 8 where they're really on the spiritual path? That's a real distinction we have to start making. You are a long ways away from being just a good human being when you become an initiate. Neither is the initiate a well-meaning devotee. There are many people out there who are very devoted in their spiritual practice. Now that's very important, especially as we get back into group 9. We're going to see that we have to become a new kind of devotee. But that's the point. We're a new kind of devotee, not just a simply well-meaning devotee. The initiate is a man who has added, and here's the key, a sound intellectual understanding to the basic qualifications of a sound moral character and devotion. That's the big distinction and very important for you to get. An initiate has a well-stocked mental body and walks in the light of his soul, realizing that in service to his fellow men and in forgetfulness of self, that's the personality, the lower self, he prepares himself to stand before the portal of initiation. That's from Bethlehem to Calvary, page 45. So we're going to look at that more throughout this series on group 9. So now we're going to get an overview of the main themes here, and there's a lot of these themes, so this video is only going to cover a couple, and then there'll be other videos here, but we're going to get an overview right now. First of all, to be a Group 9 initiate of the 3rd and 4th initiations, you have to have a scientific mind. There's a lot of documentation on that, especially in Rays and initiations, and we're going to cover some of that here in this video. You have to know how to engage in synthesis, synthesizing many different lines of thought together. You have to know the plan and the formulas. You comprehend more and more the divine plan for this planet and how it's trying to unfold. And you understand the formulas of how it will unfold. You are soul infused. Now, the 3rd initiate is not all the way soul infused, but you are as a 4th degree initiate, and that's an important thing which we'll talk about in a future video. You have to know the lower levels of samadhi. Now, this is something a lot of Bailey students have missed out on, and that is that Alice Bailey wrote the book The Light of the Soul on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali for a reason. That book illustrates Raja Yoga, and until we learn Raja Yoga, we are not anywhere close to being a 3rd degree initiate. Knowing how to enter the 2 lower forms of samadhi is essential for becoming a 3rd degree initiate. And that's something that you can prove that you can do here. That's part of the scientific mindset. It's not something you theorize or tell people about. You can tell somebody about it and have them observe you doing it. That's the important thing here. And the Group 9 initiate has perfected knowing how to do soul magic. That's also called white magic. Now, a lot of Bailey students miss the fact that in Rule 1 of A Treatise on White Magic, the first rule says you've got to have mastered samadhi. Now, those are the lower levels of samadhi, but that's the beginning, Rule 1, before you can even start soul magic. And as a Group 9 initiate, they have perfected soul magic. They're also involved in that higher mysticism and more intelligent way of loving. They're a higher devotee here, and that we're going to talk about in an upcoming video. They work with groups. They're not just the leader of a group, which we've already talked about. They're busy working groups together. And they are influencing thinkers throughout the world, and that's in a very observable way. It's not just some little esoteric group somewhere with, maybe even a few hundred students. That's not influencing thinkers throughout the world. You've got to be influencing the minds that are shaping the planet at this time. And often Group 9 initiates are not found in any esoteric group. That's why it's so important to use this model for anybody in any system or religious belief or non-religious belief anywhere in this planet. We've got to not just lock this in to somebody who's in an esoteric group somewhere. And they live a life of sacrifice. Their day, every day, is how can I serve? How can I help? And as you become a Group 9 into Group 10, you are doing that every second of every day more and more. Want to see the full video? There is much more to see. Watch it on our Patreon channel. Join our Soul to Spirit community and access teachings and training. Nearly 300 videos on spiritual topics are available. Some of our video categories are featured here. Communicate with others on a spiritual journey. Note, chat, comments, and photo are hidden to protect member confidentiality in this video. Receive ebooks and charts that explain how to evolve spiritually. Completed books are above. The books below are in the process of being finished. Get inspirational merchandise, original artwork, and more. Join for free or subscribe. You can join us at www.patreon.com/soul2spirit. And if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment, share, hit the bell for alerts, and thanks for watching. Go to patreon.com/soul2spirit